exclaimed, men and women were fighting to get in the door, pulling and mauling each other as they sometimes do at a baseball game, or a prize fight, or in a subway. Jazz music was the perfect soundtrack for a new generation of carefree young women coming of age in the 1920s. In her poem, The Flapper, writer Dorothy Parker proclaimed,
"The playful flapper here we see, the fairest of the fair. She's not what Grandma used to be, you might say, au contraire."
This modern woman of the 20s was very different from the Gibson girl of her mother's generation. With the many new freedoms, including the right to vote, women became less passive. Flappers, named after the sound their unbuckled galoshes made, partook in many of society's taboos. They smoked, drank, wore makeup, and spoke openly about sex.
There was the reaction against the flapper, women wearing short skirts and smoking and wearing lipstick and makeup and being real flippant. Of course, some of the real high ones, if you see some of the pictures, you see some women running around wearing suits and ties and smoking cigars.
Flappers' androgynous style insulted traditions of femininity. They wore their hair short or bobbed and often had flattened chests. Skirts were worn above the knee, leaving little to the imagination. Flapper culture was another in a long line of examples of society's break from tradition. Nothing captured this cycle more than a seemingly simple court case in Tennessee. In 1924, Tennessee passed the Butler Act. The law prohibited the teaching of any theory that denies the story of the divine creation of man as taught in the Bible. John Scopes, a 24-year-old high school science teacher in Dayton, Tennessee, objected to the law. With support from the American Civil Liberties Union, he taught his students Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. When word got out, Scopes was arrested and immediately brought to trial. The courtroom became a battleground between fundamentalists who believed in a literal reading of the Bible and Darwinists who championed the application of modern science. The trial turned into a media circus. Besides every tabloid covering the event, it was the first trial ever to be nationally broadcast on the radio. The courtroom overflowed with people wanting to catch a glimpse of this historic trial. In a carnival-like atmosphere, vendors sold hot dogs, Bibles, soda pop, and fans to relieve the audience from the scorching July heat. The ACLU hired esteemed lawyer Clarence Darrow to represent Scopes.
Clarence Darrow is an interesting figure. He starts out as an attorney who works for railroads and works for big business. He later has a change of heart and becomes, as the title of one book would have, an attorney for the damned. That is to say, an attorney for those people who are being oppressed, an attorney for those people who are being attacked. He's essentially a socialist. He's a great defender of the labor movement. And in a sense, his battle with William Jennings Bryan, the Scopes Monkey trial, is a battle between two different tendencies within America.
Three-time presidential nominee and hero of the common people, William Jennings Bryan, led the battle for the fundamentalists.
He was an ardent prohibitionist, and he was also, of course, a literalist, fundamentalist in the scripture. And so he was very interested in, he was against the theory of evolution and the teachings of it, all this modernism, and he was for keeping basic core values.
Scopes was found guilty, but only received a $100 fine. Although Bryan was victorious in the trial, Darrow won the war. He called Bryan to the witness stand and made him look foolish during a lengthy cross-examination. Bryan affirmed his belief that Eve had been created from Adam's rib and that a whale swallowed Jonah.
But that trial, while it's not even that significant in the scheme of things, it's kind of significant about what that decade was about. A struggle against modernity, a struggle against change, kind of this rural white Anglo-Saxon culture being replaced by a much more pluralistic society.
Symbolic of the closure of the old era, 5 days after the trial, William Jennings Bryan died of a heart attack. Before 1920, baseball was a very different game. It was a sport dominated by pitchers. Runs were scored by crafty base running and hitting for average, not power. Superstars such as Ty Cobb of the Detroit Tigers and the New York Giants' Christy Mathewson epitomized this approach to the game. In the 1920s, the game changed forever when the mighty Babe Ruth stepped to the plate. George Herman Ruth Jr. started playing baseball as a kid at St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys in Baltimore, Maryland. At the age of 19, the young pitcher caught the eye of Baltimore Orioles minor league manager Jack Dunn, who immediately signed him to his first professional contract. Dunn had a history of picking out young major league talent. When Ruth appeared at the ballpark, one player quipped, "Well, here's Jack's newest babe." The name stuck, and a legendary career was born. 5 months after the Orioles picked him up, Babe Ruth was sold to the Boston Red Sox, where he made his major league pitching debut on July 11, 1914. The Babe's hitting skills were too impressive to ignore. Red Sox manager Bill Kerrigan had Ruth play outfield on the days he wasn't pitching, and in 1919, Ruth set a single-season record by smashing 29 home runs while leading the league in RBIs and runs. The financially strapped Red Sox could not afford to pay the rising star the salary he demanded. In 1920, the Sultan of Swat was sold to the New York Yankees for $41,000. The new Yankee ushered in the decade with a bang, launching 54 home runs, an astronomical number for the time. An icon off the field as well, Ruth indulged in heavy drinking, eating, and womanizing. He missed the first 2 months of the 1925 season with a stomach ache heard round the world, resulting from his eating dozens of hot dogs washed down with beer. The Babe had a generous side as well. Being abandoned by his parents at a young age, Babe Ruth had a difficult childhood. As an influential adult, he wanted to make sure other children had it better than himself. He made countless visits to children in hospitals and orphanages and made large donations to children's charities. The Bambino became so popular in New York that a new 62,000-seat stadium was built to contain his fans. The $2.5 million Yankee Stadium opened in 1923 and was fittingly referred to as the house that Ruth built. Before Babe Ruth came to New York, the Yankees had never won a pennant. From 1920 to 1933, the Yankees created a sports dynasty, winning 7 pennants and 4 world championships. Arguably the best team in baseball history, the 1927 Yankees swept the Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series after winning 110 games and losing just 44 in the regular season. The team featured a pitcher's worst nightmare, with a lineup consisting of the Babe, Lou Gehrig, Earl Combs, and Bob Musil. This offensive dynamo was known as Murderer's Row. That year, the Babe hit 60 home runs while driving in 164 runs and having a .356 batting average. Babe Ruth retired from baseball in 1935 and became a charter member of the Baseball Hall of Fame the following year. During his career, he compiled 714 home runs, a record that stood for almost 40 years until Hank Aaron broke it in 1974. Babe Ruth died on August 16, 1948, after losing his 2-year battle with throat cancer. For 2 days, his casket lay at the main entrance to Yankee Stadium, where hundreds of thousands of people paid their last respects. The sports industry wasn't the only form of entertainment booming during the 1920s. The public flocked to the movies in record numbers to catch a glimpse of their favorite stars. One of the most famous starlets of the time was Clara Bow. The daughter of a schizophrenic mother and a sexually abusive father, Clara had a harsh, poverty-stricken childhood. In 1921, she broke away by winning a magazine beauty contest. The prize was a small role